Thank you for tuning in to TalkWad.com, the world's fastest growing internet radio network. Please check out all the other great shows on www.talkwad.com. Welcome to Think Up, Unlimited Possibilities. This show is designed to uplift you as well as explore the cohesive nature of the universe in order to discover the unlimited possibilities available through converging and expanding consciousness. And here's your host, Patricia V. Scott.
Hello and welcome to Think Up, Unlimited Possibilities. How about that? I love that intro music. I say it every time, and I love it even more the more I hear it. It's kind of like an affirmation. You know, if you wake up in the morning and you're whistling and singing that song, you start your day up, don't you? Because that's what that song's about. And that's what this show's about. So this is Patricia Scott, and this is Think Up. And we are on TalkWad Network. You can hear us live and see me, actually. Hello. Watch me talk, which is a little interesting. I was just thinking of some things I could do in the studio here that might be some little demos that might make this a little bit more of a visual experience for you in shows to come. I'm starting to get all kinds of creative ideas about this show. And that's what life's all about, isn't it? Coming up with new things. If everything stayed the same all the time, think how boring it would be. And, that roller coaster of life. And, of course, sometimes my clients come to me and they say, well, couldn't it just kind of be boring for a while? Just for a little while, just kind of go level like that instead of all those ups and downs that are always going on. So sometimes life just doesn't cooperate with what we think we want it to be. So this show is about just making the most of whatever's going on, about staying up, staying resourceful is what I think of that as meaning. It doesn't mean you're going to be laughing ha-ha and have rose-colored glasses on when things are happening around you that isn't appropriate for. It means that in the middle of anything that you find yourself in a life situation, because sometimes we do find ourselves in life situations where we would rather not be, and sometimes circumstances outside of our control put us in those situations. And when that happens, wouldn't it be nice if you had some tools, some ways of thinking, some ways of being to find a state that is resourceful enough that on the other side of that experience, you could have learned something, you could have gained some strength, some wisdom, some insights, some quality to your life based on having been through that experience. And that's the way I think about life experiences when they aren't exactly what I wish they would be in the moment, is I take that deep breath that I talk about. I press those fingers and thumbs together, which represents for me pushing my own buttons, bringing my power back into where I have the ability to think and do something, which is inside of my own physical, mental energy. And I take that deep breath. And in that moment, I come back to now. I mentioned I have a clock in my training room at Up Hypnosis Institute where I train. And that's on East Lake Road in Palm Harbor, Florida, here in Florida. And the clock, instead of numbers, instead of 12, 3, 6, and 9, it says now, now, now. It's always now. So I love that as a constant reminder, just like my license plate. Whenever I walk up to the back of my car, it says, think up. It reminds me to keep my mind, my body, my posture, my thoughts, my expectations in an upward direction, because I have 100% control over that. We all do. We have 100% control over where we send our thoughts and what we decide to entertain in our mind. And I was talking with someone earlier at a Chamber of Commerce event, and they were saying, so what does hypnosis do? What's it about? And they mentioned that someone they knew had a lot of anxiety, stress and anxiety. And I said, well, if you think about someone who can create a full-blown panic attack, for instance, A panic attack is quite an extreme response physically, mentally, emotionally. It's quite an extreme response that you can create inside of yourself, and it's based solely on your imagination. Think about how much power that is. If you can create a panic attack based on where you send your thoughts, what you entertain in your thinking, that's a lot of power in that creative mind, in that imagination. So if you take that same power, that same amount of mental force, that energy, and if you send it in a positive direction, if you hit pause, take that deep breath like I talk about, bring that oxygen into your body, shoot that oxygen up to your brain, wakes you up just a little bit, brings you back here instead of being out there in what's causing you to think about what's creating that panic or that anxiety. And as long as you're back here, now that you're back in control, you can choose to send all of that power in another direction. But what do most people do? They fight it. They get upset about it. They perpetuate it by worrying and being upset and fearful when that old habit pattern of thinking and response shows up. As soon as I offer someone another positive option in that moment, other than panic, as soon as I offer someone, when they come to see me, a process or a way to access a positive state, a calm state, a peaceful state, or anything that they would rather feel instead of that panic, they're usually pretty amazed at how their mind and their body will follow those thoughts and create that within them, create a different response. So just like Einstein said, if you keep thinking, if you keep doing something the way you've been doing it, the same mindset that created what you're doing will keep creating what you're doing. You have to change the mindset first. And of course, that's not exactly what he said, but the meaning of what he was saying was that the same thoughts that create something, a problem, are not, you're going to have to change that thinking, a different way of thinking in order to create the solution. And that's the same principle that I'm talking about. Now, tonight I'm going to be using, by the way, you can call in. Haven't had many callers yet. I welcome you to call in at any time about what I'm presenting in this radio show tonight. I'm going to be talking about mind-body therapy. And this will be one that I'm working to structure some of these shows so that they can be continuing education for people who want to learn, are already learning, or possibly have learned already, hypnosis or NLP or some of these things, that they can write a paper. If they've come to my trainings or some of the people that I know and work with, some of my colleagues, then you can write a paper on this radio show tonight, and you will be able to get some credit for it. And you'd have to contact me to find out how that's done, because this is a new thing that we're doing. This radio show is new since January. And today we're going to be talking about, like I said, mind-body therapy, methods of idiodynamic healing and hypnosis. And this is a book that is one of these real standard go-to books. If you read a lot of medical journals where they're talking about mind-body medicine or hypnosis or some of these techniques, you're going to see this book, these people quoted quite a bit because they did a lot of research, a lot of studies in the mind-body therapy. And this book is by Ernest L. Rossi and David R. Cheek, Cheek. And again, it's Mind-Body Therapy, Methods of Idiodynamic Healing in Hypnosis. And you see all the little bookmarks. I've referred to this book quite a bit, and I did some articles and research on it, and that's what I'm going to be talking about tonight. I'm going to be talking about this, and this is all research based on that book, and there is some references to some other research that I did surrounding these types of techniques. So tonight's show will be, it'll probably be at least a 2-part show. I'm not sure yet. Depends on how many times I reiterate or get things that I want to add to what we're talking about. As things are relevant, I'll bring up some other things to add to this. And yet, whatever number, this is number 1 of this training that we're doing here tonight, so to speak, or educational, informational radio show tonight. And again, it's all tied together because it's about the mindset, the way the mind affects the body. We already talked a little bit about Bruce Lipton and the biology of belief. It's about beliefs and expectations. What you believe and what you expect to happen tends to assist that thing to happening. And so this is about state-dependent encoding of memories. Did I give the phone number? I don't think I did, but if you'd like to call in, if you're listening Thursday night from 7:30 to 8:30, it is 727-493-2055, 727-493-2055. And I'll be happy to listen and answer any questions you have as it relates to this topic tonight. So, state-dependent encoding of memories, interesting concept. How this phenomenon relates to stressful or traumatic experiences and how hypnosis can help to access these memories. That's what we're going to be discussing here for the first few minutes. Information and messages that are encoded in memory at deep psychobiological levels through the release of hormones and messenger molecules during times of emotional or physical stress are said to be state dependent because they are inaccessible to conscious memory under normal conditions. Now, I talk a lot about state, being in a state, a resourceful state. You'll hear me talk a lot about state because that's kind of the lingo of hypnosis and NLP. And it's about accessing a resourceful state, again, or being able to shift your state on purpose. That's what all of these techniques are about, taking control of your thought process, and the body follows the mind. It has to. That's the way we're designed. So as Gerald Edelman explains it, it is not the content of experience that are encoded, the contents of the experience that are encoded in memory, but rather neural organizations that can process experience in certain ways. So when a person has an especially emotional or traumatic experience, for instance, the brain does not necessarily remember the specific contents of the experience. Rather, there's a sensory or a perceptual selection process of categorizing of the memory. And then it's mapped in patterns of neural groups in the brain. So if you've ever gotten with family members and discussed some event of some family gathering from many, many years ago, and you start talking about, oh yeah, I remember when old Uncle Harry knocked the turkey on the floor, whatever it is, and then one of your siblings or someone else in the family says, no, that's not what happened. So-and-so stepped in and he was gesturing and the other person grabbed it and tried to catch it, and then they dropped it on the floor. You know, you're going to have like all these different variations, representations of what happened. Just like when there's a accident, when there's a car accident, the police can tell you. They'll interview the people at the car accident, and based on how much trauma, how much stress is involved with the people that are either observing or a part of it, it'll be like they all saw something else. It's truly remarkable and amazing. Because we're, again, last time I talked about IRs, internal representations. That's what our mind does. We observe something, it comes in through all of our senses, and then our creative imagination, that I call the unlimited mind, that unconscious part of ourself, the part outside of our conscious awareness, subconscious, perhaps you call it. Anyway, whatever's outside of your awareness, that's where those comparisons happen. Your mind is comparing it to every other experience you've ever had, every reference point for what's going on, that it might be able to make sense of what's happening. And it's filtering everything through your prior experiences, through your prior history, through your prior beliefs and expectations as well, of what you expect to see or what you expect to experience. There's something on the internet that you can look. I think it's on YouTube. I've looked it up and I've shown it to my classes when I'm teaching hypnosis certification classes, and it's really a cool thing. I think it's under the Invisible Monkey or something like that. You can just Google or whatever they do in YouTube. You can look that up, and there's several different videos of these people bouncing a basketball back and forth between them. I think there's 6 or 8 people bouncing this basketball, and they're just bouncing it to the next person, back and forth, and moving around this stage or this area where they're filming this. And you watch this video, and they ask you to count how many times one of the teams passes the ball or something like that. So you're counting, you're watching those jerseys that are the color they're telling you, and you're counting how many times they pass the ball. And then at the end, they say, "Did you see the monkey?" It's really a cool thing. The first time that I saw it, even though I knew, and that was the name of it, I wasn't thinking about it by the time I got busy counting the shirts that were passing the ball. And I'm like, this is a trick. It's got to be a trick. So then they said, "Now here, watch again." And they showed it. And there's this giant gorilla that walks through right in the middle of these people while they're bouncing this ball. It's really, really a neat video. And it's a great way to see just how you do delete things. You delete what you don't expect to see sometimes. It's really an interesting phenomenon. And most people don't see the monkey. Every once in a while somebody does, or they catch it because of the beginning and they're looking for a monkey. Once you see it, you can't miss it. But then I thought they'd tricked me and showed a different video. I said, well, that couldn't have been there. And I went back and watched the first one again, and sure enough, there's that giant gorilla guy in a gorilla suit that's walking through and banging his chest and waving his arm. It's just amazing. So if you look that up, it'll give you a good idea of how we distort reality, so to speak. And by the way, it's for the purposes of survival. It's for the way we're designed to take in, because we can't comprehend every little bit of what's coming in through all our senses. So our unconscious mind, our creative mind, filters it through all of these things to make sense and to allow us to think about all the input nowadays, especially compared to 100 years ago or even 20 years ago. There's input from everything. There's 20 things going on in any given moment anymore, it seems like. So your mind is scattered, so to speak, and people think, well, I can think about 3 or 5 things at a time. You really can't. You can only, in the moment, think of one thing. You can think of a whole lot of things sequentially, in very rapid sequence. You can do that, but you can't think of 2 things at once, just like you can't be sad and joyful at the same time. You can move from one to the other very quickly if you learn to be a good actor, as I did when I was in that field years ago. And it's a great training for learning how to change your state. That was when I was learning to do what I have been doing the last 21 years. I was an actress, and I learned how to shift states. If I felt kind of down or tired and I had to become and create a persona, act as if I had a lot of energy and I was happy and silly, it's possible to shift from one to the other very, very quickly. That's what that taught me. And once you go into that positive state, which is healthier for the organism, it's pretty much like you wouldn't go back to the other one. You'd have to intentionally go back, first of all, because it's not normal to go back there. And your mind and body want to stay in a positive state because it is a healthier state. So back to our mind-body therapy here. So there's a sensory and perceptual selection process, a categorization of the memory that is then mapped in patterns of neural groups in the brain. An example of this type of encoding would be a patient that was treated whose car was stolen at knife point. This is me writing this article, so this is something that I over in California. When I was in practice, I actually had a lady who had her car stolen at knife point. She was in a shopping center parking lot, and it was in broad daylight. Now, her extreme fear caused her to consciously block out any memory of the clarity of the person, and she had resisted any recall of the episode. Her fear was also causing her to avoid going anywhere alone in a car. So it was really limiting her in many ways. Just that one incident. It's called one trial learning. So under hypnosis, we were able to get her to safely remove herself from the actual victim status and become a protected observer who was then able to sense the physical tissue and muscle memory of this deeply imprinted event. From a third-person point of view, she was able to recognize the attacker and even describe her emotional and physical state during the attack, all without feeling threatened. So just by changing the perceptual position, as we say, and looking at herself out there with that experience from a safe, protected distance, She was able to access within herself where that was imprinted in muscle memory and in her mind, in her unconscious mind. She could sense the physical and bring it back into awareness. The hypothesis is that you can use idiodynamic finger signaling under hypnosis while reviewing traumatic events in order to access the state-dependent memories that have been encoded at nonverbal sensory levels. Now, when we talk about the name of this is mind-body therapy, methods of idiodynamic healing. So an idiomotor response is a unconscious movement. It can be a nodding of the head, and we get into this a little bit later, but in this case, they're talking about a little finger movement. You set it up at the beginning of a process when you're using these techniques. And then when someone gets out of their own way and relaxes, gets their body relaxed and lets their mind kind of relax into that hypnotic state and go into that safe mode, then their unconscious mind can start to give you some answers that come from that higher level of mind where all of that is recorded very efficiently, very literally as they perceived it. Remember that, because it is recorded as the person perceived it, which is why we do have different kinds of memories from other people that had the same experience with us. So this releases hormonal information substances that originally encoded the event in a state-bound condition. So it releases the hormone information that was created in that moment when they were in that state during that event. These memories can then be dissociated, like I was talking about, and discussed and therapeutically reframed. Once my client in the earlier example was able to verbalize her experience, healing therapy was possible. Once she was able to recall it from a safe point of view, it changed how she felt about it because she was safe remembering it. It changed her perception about the entire incident. And I tell people all the time that when you have something from your past that is traumatizing you or that is still affecting you negatively, if it's a memory of some breakup with someone or whatever it is really is unimportant. Something that you recall that when you think of it, it causes you to feel terrible. Every time you recall a memory of any kind, but in this example, every time you recall that memory, you color the memory a little bit with whatever state you are in when you recall it. And what that means is if you happen to just be in a particularly resourceful, happy state, and something reminds you of that memory that usually in the past would have made you go into a negative state, it's possible that because you were so up and positive in that moment and happy when it came to your attention, maybe you were just reminded of it arbitrarily by someone else, and all of a sudden, now the next time that person thinks of that, the state they were in the last time is going to color it a little bit differently. That positive state is going to color that memory forever. So every time you bring up a memory, it's colored a little bit by what state you're in, if that makes sense. So that's what we can do in these processes, is to have someone bring up a memory in a different state than the one that they usually have it stored, related to in their storage area of their unconscious mind. And by seeing it from that perspective, by feeling it with a different feeling, by remembering it, recalling it with a different feeling, holding a different feeling inside of their body, then the next time it tends to go in that direction. Again, because the unconscious mind always wants to choose. If you give it a choice, if you offer it a healthier, better option that feels better, it's going to take the healthier, better option. It's always going to choose generally what you offer it that's going to be a healthier, better option. Now we're going to talk a little bit about the revolutionary shift from the early authoritarian techniques used in therapeutic hypnosis to the permissive and naturalistic approaches as a way of accessing and utilizing state-dependent memory, learning, and behavior. Now, a lot of you may have seen, again, at the chamber event I was at earlier, someone said, oh, do they swing the watch, right? Because in some of the old movies, they would swing the watch. And I said, well, actually, in reality, they didn't swing the watch that way when they even did use a watch or some object of focus, which is all the watch was. It was an object of focus to narrow the person's focus, to get rid of all that extraneous thought. And the way they actually did it was back and forth toward and away from the eyes, not back and forth this way. but toward and away from. Because if you swing something toward and away from yourself in front of your eyes have to keep adjusting for the distance changes that are very rapid. And by doing that, it fatigues the eyes and the eye muscles, therefore facilitating eye closure. So that's what that was all about. It's all about focusing on one thing. It's one-minded focus, which almost was the name of hypnosis way back centuries ago, that Braid, when he called it hypnos, named it after the sleep god, the Greek sleep god, hypnos. It was a while later that he realized people aren't really asleep. Actually, they're in a heightened state of awareness when they're in hypnosis. So by the time he figured that out, the word hypnosis had already caught on. And he had come up with some term that basically meant single focus or single-minded focus or something like that. I can't remember the exact term. And it just never caught on. So hypnosis had already stuck by then. But that's really what it is. And that's what Braid figured out, is that it's single-minded focus, whether it's hitting a golf ball, and we talked about sports before, whatever it is you're doing. Think about if whatever task you are undertaking, whether it's preparing a report, writing, creative writing, whether it's performing in some way, whether it's painting a picture, whether it's playing a sport, or whether it's performing on your job in some way, are being a certain way with the opposite sex. Any of these things require focus. And if the extraneous thoughts in your head are opposed to the goal that you have in those situations, that's going to interfere with your effectiveness, with you accessing whatever you have already trained in or learned, whatever you may know about that or would like to, the way that you would like to be in that situation. So your mindset, if you're focused, to me, that's what this is all about. It's about learning in any given moment to refocus, to kind of eject all of those doubts and limiting thoughts and extraneous, unhelpful thoughts and opinions and all of those things so that you can function at a higher level. That's really what I think of this all being about. So that's what we're talking about here. And now we're going to apply it to state-dependent memory, learning, and behavior. The focus exercise I did in one of the other radio shows, and you can just look back through the archives and find it. I did a focus exercise. I think I have it tagged that way if you find it on YouTube or talkwad.com. And the whole idea of that is to go into the learning state. It's by focusing on something and then going into the peripheral with your awareness. And if you study that way, and then when it's time to take the test, if you go back into that state, that's what this means. You go back into that same state where you learned that information, and the information comes forth. It opens what I talk about, that channel. It opens up that channel to the unconscious, which is where all of our learned behaviors, all of our learned information, anything you've studied or learned how to do is at the unconscious level, and it becomes automatic once you've learned it. And when you open that channel, it automatically will come forth when you read the question or when someone asks you the question. It'll just show up from that unconscious archives, and it's very efficient. If you just play with this in some situations, you'll be amazed at how quickly you access information. If you're ever around someone and you're trying to think of the name of a movie, maybe, or someone, maybe the name of an actor in a movie, or someone's phone number, anything like that. If you stop using that conscious effort, if you're having a struggle with it, if it doesn't come right away, if you just stop that fight of using, conscious effort, that stress and tension of that, and let it go, and just say, it'll come to me in a moment. And I started doing this a few years ago, I guess, whenever I would forget something or couldn't come up with the right word or the right phrase or the name or whatever. And I would say, it'll come to me in a moment. And what I found was it shows up almost instantly. And if not instantly, it shows up very, very soon. A lot sooner than if I kept pushing, kept that tension of trying to remember something. That tends to shut that door to the unconscious, and that's not an efficient way to get the information out. And what happens when people take tests? I'm talking, whether it's children or adults. I work with accountants and lawyers and people who have to take some pretty extreme high-stress tests. And the situation of taking the test itself creates stress, and that closes that door. So to be able to open it up, With that deep breath, by opening up the peripheral and getting into a more calm state inside, it opens that channel to the unconscious, and then that information, as I say, just comes and falls right out on the page. So, learning and behavior. In the early part of the 19th century, the authoritarian style of hypnosis would sometimes lead the patients to fabricate traumatic memories in order to please the therapist. You know, the Svengali, you are under my control kind of a idea for that authoritarian, where the hypnotist is in control and telling the person. That's what that means. That was an older style. Used to be you would give, instead of just suggestions, you would give commands. I command you to this. You do this, do this. Freud and Jung were among those who used the traditional approach. And we talked about Freud previously a little bit, so we'll get into a little bit more about that. And that was the thing, like the therapist was the one with all the control and all the intelligence and all of the answers. And by the way, that wasn't very effective. It wasn't an efficient way of doing this work. And that's why this transition that we're talking about in this section. The stress generated by this type of therapy made it difficult for the patient to convert these memories into verbal communication. As a result, this form of therapy was proving to be unreliable for healing or behavioral alteration. This led to the development of a more permissive, idiodynamic, and exploratory approach to hypnotherapeutic hypnosis. Erickson, we talked about before, Milton Erickson. Thank goodness for Milton Erickson. He termed this style of therapy as the utilization approach. He explained that the altered behavior derives from the life experience of the patient and not from the therapist. That just makes sense, doesn't it? I tell people the expert is inside of you. I don't have the answers. I have some really cool techniques and tools and ways to assist someone to access the expert within them that knows what needs to be done, that knows what the answers are, that knows what the cells are doing if it's a physical condition, that knows what it can do to eliminate conditions and allergies and pain and everything else. It knows what to do because it knows what happened to make it there, and it knows what has to happen to make it different, make the experience different. So the utilization approach was what Erickson, using whatever's available, starting from where the person is, having respect for the experience they're having being the right one based on what they have been thinking and experiencing and what they have learned. Instead of you're wrong or you're broke or you need to be fixed. It's a whole different mindset on the part of the practitioner. And Erickson explained that the altered behavior derives from the life experience of the patient. Like I said, it's not the therapist. He found that a more permissive approach eliminated the pressure that previously had motivated patients to fabricate information. So it's all about being in a relaxed, open state and, allowing those answers to come from inside of the person where they really exist. There has been a shifting away from the direct authoritarian form of therapy, thank goodness, which implied that the therapist had he had the power to affect changes in the patient. Again, that the therapist was the one with the power. The new methods utilize the patient's own resources to reassociate and reorganize their ideas, their understandings, their memories in order to effect a cure. It's believed that it is a revolutionary shift to a naturalistic, permissive approach that has allowed patients to be able to break through the limitations of conscious attitudes in order to access state-dependent memory, learning, and behavior. The patient can then use their inner resources to restructure and reorganize their self. So, now I'm going to discuss idiodynamic signaling. We were just talking about that a little bit in general, and easy for me to say, finger signaling in particular. And I'm going to explain how the Chevreul pendulum, some of you out there may have played or had experiences with pendulums, how it's used to facilitate idiomotor signaling. And we do use a pendulum in my trainings. I don't use them in my practice. They're fun to play with because they are an external expression, a response based on your unconscious thoughts and feelings. And they're a good way to access. It's another way of getting that ideomotor response because it picks up the little minute nerves in your fingers as you're holding a pendulum to allow that unconscious to come through in a non-threatening way. And it's very interesting to see how these things work. A lot of times, the more left brain, the more analytical people that I get in my classes, the better response they get, and the more amazed they are at how they get these responses from their unconscious mind as that pendulum starts to offer them the answers. It's pretty cool stuff. Ideodynamic signaling. It's a tool, and it's used in the utilization approach. Cheek and Lacrone. We talked about them in a previous book that I brought in. They developed these techniques to access memories and ideas that are not accessible to the conscious mind. By using a pendulum or finger signaling, they're both the same concept. The ideodynamic movements are unconscious. That's what all that means. There's nothing woo-woo about this. It's all very, very practical. The subject is able to access the inner mind. These methods have the advantage of being very easy to learn, and they're consistently productive even in unhypnotized people. So in the class, we just play with them, and just by focusing on that pendulum and thinking a thought or thinking a question, the unconscious offers responses for the person. Ideodynamic finger signaling, for instance, uses a series of questions that are specifically constructed to allow the subject to access meaningful emotional sets that are associated with amnesiac material. The first series of questions designed to establish which finger will be designated to a particular response. Using very open, permissive questioning, a la Milton Erickson. Like I said, the subject allows his unconscious mind to select the finger that will signal to represent yes and one for no. Some people will use I don't know or whatever. I tend not to use that. I just use yes and no. If there's no answer, then you know they don't know. It is important to allow a response for I'm ready to know the answer consciously now. Usually I'll just ask the person that if I'm doing these kinds of processes or teaching it in the classes that I teach. I'll just say, are you ready to know the answer? And if the answer is no, then you can move on to something else, especially in the early stages of questioning. There may be some resistance there that has to be moved past in another way, because the person's only going to reveal what's safe to reveal. And I 100% believe that. That's something I've never found someone in a hypnotic or therapeutic process, as long as you have the right rapport built up in the session and you're working with the person and you've got their trust and your intention is pure and you want to help them. Hopefully that's the case with anyone doing these kinds of things. Then whatever comes up is going to be something. Doesn't mean it might not be very emotional. Sometimes it truly is when there's some past trauma. Some trauma isn't even remembered consciously. Some is remembered consciously, and there's resistance to reaccessing it because of the fear. So all of these things, but when it does get accessed, when it comes up in a session in any way, I know that it's going to be okay, that the person is ready, that they have already done whatever was necessary with the work with me or with whatever they've been doing to prepare up to that moment when the mind knew it was safe to bring it up. Now you're ready for this now. There's something that you can learn from it and move past it. There's something you can get from it in some way that will allow you to move past it and gain something from that. So that's my theory. And so far in 21 years of practice and in talking to other people that do these kinds of techniques and have this type of an approach, that's the way it works. That is just the way it works. And there's never been an exception that I know of where it has been otherwise. So using that permissive questioning, the subject gets that yes and no. Then time is allowed, and it takes the pressure off the patient who may be harboring especially difficult or painful memories while at the same time giving the subtle suggestion that the answer will be forthcoming by ending this phrase with the word yet. So when you say you're not ready to know the answer consciously yet, so that implication is there that you will be ready at some point in the future. It's just right now. It's just not the right time yet. So, and by the way, when I'm using the word patient in this presentation that I'm doing tonight, when I'm working with someone, I don't see patients. I see clients. They're called clients in my world. I am not a medical doctor. I'm a hypnotherapist, and the things that I'm trained in are not about diagnosing or prescribing anything. So they're really clients to me. I'm just speaking from a frame of the way that Rossi and Cheek talk. And wow, this is going so fast. So just so you know, when I say patient, it's speaking from their standpoint as medical people. So anyway, age regression can also be facilitated very quickly by using idiomotor finger signals. So doing age regression, and we may do a whole show on that at some point in the future. It's important to observe the patient carefully for other peripheral responses to the questioning, such as their breathing, their perspiration, their skin tone, all of these things. In the hypnosis certification trainings, we talk about those, about developing your sensory acuity, getting into a state as someone that is facilitating this, that allows you to perceive, and again, from that open frame, instead of looking at someone too closely where you miss a lot, getting into that open state, and the same as the learning state with your peripheral, but you're focusing from a higher level of mind. That way your unconscious is perceiving of little tiny little movements. You're able to perceive more from that. And you're able to guide what you're saying, to guide the person based on what you're noticing in those little tiny responses. All of these observations combined with the finger movements give clues as to where to go with the questioning, just like I said. And also at times the finger movement may be quite subtle, might be so tiny. Again, developing that sensory acuity where you can see and perceive of little tiny movements, little tiny changes in the eyes, the muscles, in the movement of the fingers. And it may take some time after uncovering certain information before the patient is ready to verbalize what is being remembered or experienced. So again, that permissive, softer, gentler way of approaching that allows for the person to do it in their own way, in their own time. Great patience and attention is necessary to assure that the pace is appropriate for the comfort of the patient. The text of Mind-Body Therapy that this is based on, it also offers a very specific 3-stage sequence that should be followed in order to verify the validity of the material accessed by ideodynamic signaling. And I'm gonna tell you what those 3 things are, because remember we said that memories can be, they're not necessarily accurate. You want to make sure that what you're accessing is valid, at least as to the person's perception. Number 1 is the emotional and physiological memory can first be seen through changes in respiration, pulse rate, and emotional reactions. Changes in respiration, pulse rate, and emotional reactions. These must appear prior to the finger being lifted. So that's emotional and physiological memory. Number 2 is ideodynamic signals indicate the accessing of memory at an unconscious level that still can be verbalized. Number 3, verbal reporting of the material that has been accessed. It may take repetition of the process to reach this level, to be able to verbalize it, in other words, depending upon the gravity of the experience. So those are the 3-stage, that's the 3 very specific stages that should be followed to verify the validity of anything you're accessing through idiomotor responses. And the Chevreul pendulum is a very effective tool to use to introduce hypnosis and ideodynamic signaling to people who may be fearful of the hypnotic process. You can tell the patient that the pendulum can be used to find out things they can't consciously remember. And then you have them hold the pendulum and tell them to think and feel yes, get a yes signal until there's a slight movement in a particular direction or in a circle. And then you go on to determine the movements that will represent no and etc. So this can be a way, and I do know some therapists that use pendulums just to offer that concept to their client or their patient. So it just depends on who you're working with. And again, it's all about rapport. Whatever you sense is going to be the right way to present things to someone. And then you then test the choices that they made if you've got a yes signal and a no signal. And you ask several questions that have obvious yes/no that are obvious yes/no questions, and you do that to kind of verify that the yes and the no is still holding true, that it is valid, and that the pendulum is going the same way, that it still agrees with what had been established. And once the signals are verified, then therapy can proceed by having the subject pretend to be an observer to facilitate dissociation, allow them to simply wonder about what answer the pendulum might give. That's one way to get the unconscious to do it. Just, I wonder what answer it might give. This process will usually lead the patient into hypnosis and allow them to explore areas that can give them insight into how to resolve their problems in their own way. How to resolve the problems in their own way. That's what it's all about. Teaching people strategies for life, strategies for resolution of their problems. If someone just had to take a pill and their problem was gone, they didn't really learn anything, did they? They learned to take a pill. That's what they learned. And if we had a magic pill for everything in life, we would learn very little throughout our life, wouldn't we? So if you think about it like that, that's called a reframe. Instead of something out there is going to fix me, how about if there's nothing wrong with the way I'm functioning based on what's been happening and how I'm thinking about it? That changes the whole thought. It's like, oh, you mean there's nothing wrong with me? No, you're functioning perfectly. And you're producing a response that isn't really assisting you in your life. You're producing a response that maybe isn't healthy for you, or isn't productive for you, or isn't allowing you to reach the financial goals you have. It's irrelevant what the goal is, what the thing is that you want to change. It's all the same principles. It all starts with how we think about it. How we think about it creates our internal representation and starts to create belief systems and starts to create our expectations surrounding that thing and our ideas about ourselves in relation to that thing. So I tell my weight loss people, if you want to lose weight, and every time you see someone who's thin the way you would like to be, and you say, let's say it's a woman, and she sees a woman about her age and her height and everything, and she's thin, and the person looks at her and says, oh, I hate her. I can't stand it. She probably was born that way, or starts to send any kind of negative thoughts or information or words about that. Their unconscious mind is going to fight ever going there. It's going to resist becoming thin like that person they were just insulting. The unconscious doesn't want to get insulted. So it's not going to go somewhere where you just were insulting someone. If your thought is all rich people are greedy, I hate to tell you this, but it's very unlikely you're ever going to have money. Because if all rich people are greedy, who wants to be greedy? Your unconscious mind doesn't want you to be greedy. That's a negative. If you say it like that, your unconscious knows it's a negative. It's something that is a bad thing. Those are bad people. And it's going to fight you every step of the way. And the unconscious, like we talked about, is, unlimited in its power compared to the conscious mind, which is very limited in what it has the ability to focus on and be in control of. So the unconscious has all that power. It's going to win. And those are the people, my theory is that those are the people that win the lottery, and then a year or two later, they're broke again. They have a mindset, unless they change their mindset, because the mindset is, if the mindset is that rich people are greedy, they're never going to hold on to that. Their unconscious won't let them. It'll find some way to lose it, to get rid of it, to whatever. And that's the way, the dynamics of our design. If once you know the design, it's very efficient. It can send you in one direction or the other. And back to what I started with, the panic attack. By thinking and imagining horrible things happening all the time, you can start to train into the brain the habit of freaking out, of creating amazing emotional responses with all these chemicals in your body that is a total full-blown panic attack if you work at it. And since you're the one that has to create that, in that situation. You didn't come out of the womb with that ability or with that happening to you in that situation. And we can talk sometimes about things that you do come out of the womb with. And even those, I believe, anything can be changed. Because if you change and send that creative imagination in a different direction of things you would love to have happen and the most wonderful outcome for the situation you're in and the best possible results of the financial planning that you're doing, and you keep your mental focus and your imagination on those things, I guarantee you your financial situation is going to improve instantly. I've done it in my own life. I've caught myself at different times in my life when I started to fall into, for whatever reasons, a little bit of a negative mindset, and the money flow was shut down. The faucet closed. And as soon as I became aware of it and shifted and reminded myself of how it is and how I have to think to be productive, to be successful, to be financially whatever I want to be confident, whatever it is, then your mind instantly will send you in the other direction. And again, if it's something positive and healthy for you, my theory is that the mind will learn it much faster because it's part of the unconscious mind's job is to maintain the integrity of the body, to run the bodily functions. So if you're in a healthier state and your immune system's stronger and your heart's beating right and everything's in balance, in harmony, everything the way it was designed, then your mind wants to learn that quickly. All you have to do is ask it with the right words and get out of the way. Unfortunately, a lot of people don't know the right words. So that's what we're going to be talking about in here. I'm working at getting one of my colleagues, I won't say the name yet, to do either a call-in host thing. He's up north. And to talk about affirmations, because every thought you think over and over repeatedly in your head all day long is your affirmation. That is your automatic programming. That is you reinforcing whatever's going on. And if you listen to yourself when you talk to people, listen to how you describe yourself. I'm the kind of I'm very lucky. I say that all the time. I've said that for years. I got it from my dad. He used to say that. And I just started saying it. And I noticed the more I said it, the luckier I got. And I go to these Chamber of Commerce events. I'm always winning things. I just won 2 things in the last week at 2 events. And it doesn't even surprise me. I just expect it. I talk about being lucky all the time, and it happens over and over and over. It's really pretty fun, actually. It's fun to win things. Why not? So when I win the lottery, that's going to be something I can write a book about and say how I won the lottery using hypnosis and mental imagery, because I know that's going to happen. Well, I have won the lottery, actually. I won $2,000 in California, but I'm working on that 6th number now. That was only a 5-number lottery. So I know it's coming. I know it is. And the more I say it, the more I think it, the more I believe it. Soon I will have that book and be doing my book tour on how to be lucky using these processes. So I hope you enjoyed this show. It was a little bit clinical here. And like I said, I want some of these to be educational. Because thinking up is about educating yourself how to think in ways that keep you up, that keep you resourceful, that keep you on top of things, that allow you to enjoy the highs in life even higher. And when things aren't as high as you'd like them to be, how to get them there with your mind. You can get it there with your mind. You have that ability. And when things are kind of down and bummer, as they say, that you have the ability to get through that in a way that doesn't bring you down, that allows you to actually learn something from it, actually get something positive on the other side of it. I know it's possible in every situation. Trust me. Trust me. Believe me. So this is the book, Mind Body Therapy. We will obviously be doing at least 2 more shows on this. And this will be for continuing education for hypnotists. And you can email me at uphypnosis.com or info@uphypnosis.com. My website, obviously, is uphypnosis.com. Up stands for Unlimited Possibilities. And this is Think Up, because that is my affirmation. I drive a car with that license plate. I have a driving affirmation, I tell people. I have a driving affirmation. So I'm driven to think up. There you go. And it's a constant reminder. So think up. Bring yourself back to the now every now and then during the day. Take that deep breath. Press the finger and thumb together on one or both hands and come back to now, pivot into your power center, I call it, into your ability to think right here. And notice how you can shift your thinking in that moment in a way that shifts your state a little bit. Shifting states, that's what it's all about. Enjoy giving yourself little perks, little moments of joy, little laughter. Laughter is a wonderful state to shift into. Sometimes I just laugh at myself and I don't even know why I'm laughing at myself, and it's still a positive, healthy state. So you can always do that. You can think of something fun, think of something pleasurable, something that causes you to feel good. And when you see a sunset, anchor that in, breathe it in, and add it to your ability of something to recall, something to add power. So, no one called in again today. I'd love to get some questions someday. And if you're watching, and I always give something away, if you email me at info@uphypnosis.com or through the website, uphypnosis.com, I will send you this little booklet it's a few pages on forming the happiness habit. It's a little handout that I give out in one of my classes, and it will be something that will tweak your mind. It will tweak your memory of some things perhaps that I said here today, and hopefully it'll bring a smile to your face and offer you some ideas that your creative mind will make your unique own way of bringing yourself up, of keeping yourself up, of being in the most positive, healthy state in any given moment throughout your life. Because why would you not if it's possible? And it is. That's your choice. Once you choose it and learn how to use the language of the unconscious mind efficiently, it's automatic. That's the way habits are formed. So form the happiness habit. Email me and I'll tell me that you saw this, even if it's on an archive show. And I will send you that in a PDF form. So I think I'm getting close to time here. Yeah, wrap it up. Adam says wrap it up. So this is Patricia V. Scott. This is Think Up Unlimited Possibilities. And I really enjoyed being with you tonight. And I hope you'll join me again next Thursday and every Thursday here at Talk WAD Network. Thank you.